These are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our third session of Building Strong Vocabulary. This is part 3, Word Parts and Analysis. All right, just a few housekeeping items. Hopefully you're able to view or download the session handouts so you can follow along if you would like to. If you don't want to download them just yet, you will have a copy of this presentation, and I'll provide you with a link where you can get all the materials at the end of the session as well, including the presentation. It is being recorded, today's session, and actually it's going to be up on the Region 10 site within the next 2 weeks along with parts 1 and part 2. I decided to just put them all together in one little section instead of you having to kind of search for them. So they will be under in our online learning center under Building Strong Vocabulary 3-part series, or something to that effect for the name. This session is also filled with information, and if you wish to ask any questions, please do so. However, I'll probably answer most of them at the end of the session if the time permits. You can also send your questions by email to the email address on the screen there. Thanks so much for joining us today. A little bit about myself. My name is Chandra Shaw. I'm an ELAR consultant for teaching and learning. When I taught in the classrooms, I did 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, all self-contained. Then I went into instructional coaching, so I did 3 years as an instructional coach and a reading specialist at the intermediate and middle school levels, 2 years as a high school master teacher, and this is going on actually my 4th year at Region 10, so not second, my 4th year at Region 10. So I say all that to let you know that I've worked at the different levels, and all of the strategies that I'm showing you today definitely can work at any of these levels, and you can go back tomorrow in your classrooms and apply them for immediate impact. So this is part 3 of a 3-part series for Building Strong Vocabulary. I had tried before to do the whole thing in 1 hour, and there's just way too much information to be able to do this whole thing in 1 hour. So I decided to break it up over 3 different 1-hour webinars. And that way, each time you'd have some time to go back and implement some things in your classroom, try them out, and see how they worked for you. So the first time, or part 1, we looked at the research on vocabulary development. We looked at the impact that vocabulary development can have on comprehension and achievement. We defined academic vocabulary and tried to understand how to actually select academic words for our students. Which one should we teach? Which one should go up on our word walls? That was part 1. In part 2, we wanted to understand the different types of context clues that the authors provide in order to assist our students in their learning. And then we wanted to gain some practical ways in order to teach those types of context clues so that our students could really work on building their vocabulary. In today's session, our goals are to understand the importance of teaching word parts and word analysis. I think this part is, if it's not the most important part of building vocabulary, it is right up there with the top choice. We also want to gain some practical ways in order to teach the word parts and analysis, and then learn some game-like ways to actually practice vocabulary development. So I'd like to start off by giving you the resources that I use in the development of this training. Word Nerds and Vocabularians are both books that you can preview entirely online for free from stenhouse.com. So you can preview both these books. Word Nerds is more of the elementary version, and then Vocabularians is the secondary version for word study. Lots of great ideas are in these books, and like I say, you can preview them for free. A couple of other resources that I use. This one is from the U.S. Department of Education. It's teaching academic content and literacy to English language learners in the elementary and middle school. You can also download this for free. It's a fantastic resource, and not only this one can be found on that online site, but they have lots of different guides like this that have been peer reviewed, and they tell you the effect size or the effectiveness of the strategies in these different books. I do apologize today. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm having to kind of sip on some warm tea and to keep my voice up. The last resource that I use in developing this session is called Vocabulary is Comprehension. When I saw that, I just knew that this was a book that I had to read because this is exactly true. A lot of times what I would find in the classroom with my kids is that it's not so much that they couldn't read, it's just that they didn't understand the vocabulary words that the complex texts were kind of throwing at them. And so if we improve kids' vocabulary, we're definitely going to work on improving their comprehension at the same time. So I'd like to start off my session with this question. I'm going to ask it every time until I can walk into any classroom and ask a child and they all know this one. So the question is, about how many new words per year should a student learn? I'm going to give you just about maybe 10 or 15 seconds to kind of type in your choice. Give me a number. How many new words every year should kids be learning? Because that's an important number. We need to know it as teachers and our kids need to know it. So in the question section there or the chat section, if you could type in your response to that particular question. How many words per year should students learn? Go ahead, try. Give me a suggestion. Well, I will tell you from kids, I usually get numbers like 75, 25, 38, things like that. With the older kids, they are a little bit more, I guess they're thinking a little bit more critically, and they'll say things like 365, so 1 word per day. And when I actually tell them the real number of words they're supposed to learn each year, their mouths always drop and they think, what? No way. So the real answer here is that students should learn 2,000 to 3,000 new words per year. That's right, 2,000 to 3,000 new words per year. I'm going to say it until I can't say it anymore. That's how many new words every year our kids should be learning. And as teachers, we've got to do a better job at making kids word conscious because we can't teach them every single word they have to know. As a teacher, you can only explicitly teach about 400 words per year. So the other 2,500 or so are up to the children to seek for themselves in many cases. So let's take a look at the 3 strategies that we've already covered in parts 1 and part 2, which were wide independent reading, direct teaching of academic vocabulary, and then teaching of context clues in our part 2. That's what we did. Today we're going to look at strategy number 4, which is teaching word parts and analysis. And for an added bonus, we're going to throw in strategy number 5, which is multiple exposures to the words in game-like situations. So we're starting with our strategy number 4. This is part 3, explicit instruction in word parts and analysis. But first, let's take a look and see what the standards say about word parts. Look, as early as 2nd grade, our kids are supposed to be using prefixes and suffixes to determine the meanings of words. And in 3rd grade, they have to identify the meaning of common prefixes and suffixes. And then 4th through 8th grade, they determine the meaning of grade level academic English words derived from Latin and Greek roots. So that's where they're going to throw in the linguistic roots. Now, here's a bit of information for you. About 90% of English words of 2 or more syllables are Greek or Latin origin, or of Greek or Latin origin. And this is one of the most underutilized truths in language arts instruction, in vocabulary development. We do not do enough of teaching our kids to analyze word parts. 90% of the multisyllabic words in English are from the Greek or Latin root. Okay, so that's why our SEs actually specify those 2 languages. So we've got to do a better job of just, we can't just hit this once or twice throughout the school year. We've got to make sure that we build in routines and structures in the classroom so that kids are constantly looking at word parts, constantly analyzing words and looking for similarities in and across other words. So one of the things that we can do is the basic prefix lesson. Okay, and so here's a sample lesson in which you pre-teach a couple of prefixes, such as the following, like re, which means to do again, un, pre, and dis. So these are very common prefixes. So you teach the meaning of these prefixes. And then you want to provide examples of real words using those prefixes for the students. Okay, so talk about a vocabulary lesson that is so quick to put together. This is definitely one of those. So you're going to provide examples of real words using those, and then you're going to allow the students to create new words or other real words, as many or list as many words as possible containing that particular prefix. So this is one of those things that you can do. It's so easy to do. It doesn't have to be a worksheet, just getting kids to come up with lists of words. So here's how that lesson might look. If I'm teaching the prefix re, I'm going to say that re means to do again or to build, to do again. So in this case, the word is rebuild. So the definition of rebuild would be to build again. And then I want to give them, like I say, a real world example in the sample sentence. When the tornado destroyed my aunt's house, she had to rebuild. Okay, and notice here that I showed them a visual on the screen so that the kids can see what I'm talking about. That's really going to help my ELL kids. It's going to help my kids who might struggle with the language. So we have to make sure that we're providing that visual. So once I've taught this prefix, given them a real world example and a sample sentence with a visual, the next thing I might do is to have them work on a word mapping activity. So they're going to look at the prefix re. It means back or again. And then I'm going to have them kind of make a little bubble map. And then in the center, they're going to put the re. And then I can set my timer for, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes. They can work in a group, and they try to come up with as many words as possible that have the prefix re. Okay? So I really want them thinking about the words. A lot of times we don't give students enough time to just play with words and just become lovers of words. And we don't give them enough time to actually draw on the words, their background knowledge that they really already know or have heard before. So this is one of the things that I could do here. So let's see, words that start with re. If you would, there in the questions box or in the chat window, whichever one there you can actually type in, go ahead and start typing in some words that start with the prefix re. So there, maybe in the questions, I think that one might be the one that actually shows up for you guys. Reflect, oh, that's a good one, thanks. Give me another. Anyone else? Thanks, Michelle. Remorse, wonderful. Any others? Any others? Record, okay, good. So all of these words that have the prefix re, we just want kids thinking about the words they already know, how these words could be related to other words based on that prefix. So we can come up with things like reward, record, and stuff like that for our kiddos. Let's see, redo, reincarnate, review, repay, repost, rebuild, repot something, so you can repot a plant if you are a gardener. So we just have kids fill out these word maps in which they are forced to kind of think of the different words and how they are related. You put them in groups, and this is something that you can do ever so often whenever you have a few minutes left in class. Once you've taught these lessons, you give kids the prefix or a suffix or a root or a base or anything like that, and then you just have them list as many words as possible, you know, maybe give an award or something to the team that gets the most words. My students always enjoyed the word activity games that we used to play like that, and it really helped to build a vocabulary. So just a different variation of that, we have the base graph. So they would put that in the middle, and again, we would do the same thing. They would have to come up with different words that contain that particular base. Also, what we want to do is to get them to, you know, eventually they get really smart. They know to put graph, graphs, graphing, you know, autograph, autographs, photograph, photographs. So that eventually the kids get really good at it and start coming up just by changing those little small inflectional endings like ing or s and eds and things like that on the words. So it really helps them to work on their wordplay. Another activity that you can use playing with word parts would be vocabulary trees. So you introduce this activity by actually pre-teaching, again, the meaning of several roots. And then you want to provide the examples which contain those roots. So you just want to start off by teaching them some different roots. but you're not going to tell them all the words. You're going to maybe have the kids do a little mini inquiry where they have to research some other words that might have that same root. Then what you have the kids do is actually create vocabulary trees using each one of the roots, and each tree must include the following. So this is one variation. They got to have the root or base with this definition at the bottom of the tree. They have to have at least 3 branches, which contains the words that have that root along with their definitions. And then also in between there, we want a sentence that accompanies each new word, and their sentences always have to show that they know what the word means in context. So here's an example of what I mean here. Here at the bottom of this tree, I have the root ped, which means foot. And then on each branch, then I have to come up with a word, pedal, and its definition. There's pedestrian, pedicure, pedometer. So here I've put all the the words in the sentences there that are related or contain the root ped. And then in between, I'm going to go back and put a sentence for each one that shows I kind of know what they mean. Oops, excuse me, know what they mean. So this is one way I could do a vocabulary tree. Have the kids draw their own trees on a sheet of manila paper, or I could make it as large as I want to by giving them a piece of chart paper. They work in groups to do this. And that's one way to do a vocabulary tree. Another way to do it would be to just have kids try to come up with as many words as possible. This is one for a little bit of the older students because it has so many boxes up here for them to actually put the words in. But again, I'm going to have them put the root ped, and then the meaning, which means foot. And then I would have those students to go ahead and try to come up with as many words as possible. So in this case, pedal, pedestrian, pedestrians, pedicure, pedagogue, pediatrician, peddler, millipede, centipede, pedometer, quadruped. So I could have my kids come up with as many words as possible with this particular root. And what I'm doing here is training my students to build on their background knowledge, to think about words they already know, to make those connections that all of these words have something to do with the meaning foot. A peddler is someone who goes around and sells his stuff, that he walks around on foot to, sell his stuff. Now, pediatrician has to do with children, and somewhere along the line back in our history, the history of the word, or the root ped, which ped is Latin, there was a term that meant child, and a pediatrician became the person who actually healed the child. A pedagogue was the person who actually taught the child, and so that was one of the reasons that pediatrician and sometimes words that we think mean foot actually have something to do with a child. Okay. So again, to use those vocabulary trees, you can try it. Just create a vocabulary tree from one of the following roots. This is how I would give it to my kids after they've worked in a group on this activity. Then I could give them any of these as an individual assignment. That way it's not a worksheet. It's them creating their own vocabulary tree using one of these roots. You can make it as difficult or as easy as you would like. I'm all for more difficulty because that creates more critical thinking. So I like the first tree where they actually have to come up with the definition and sentences and things like that. But you can increase the number of branches that the tree has to have based on the level of your student. So that's another way you can individualize it for the students that you actually have in your classroom. Again, this works in building kids' vocabulary. I have seen it work from the lowest elementary grades up to high school, really building kids' vocabulary. There are a couple of things kids need to know. They need to know how many new words they're supposed to learn every year. They need to practice on pronouncing those words and saying those words in class. And as a teacher, whenever you get ready to teach those words, that's how you need to preface it to the kids, that this, why are we working on vocabulary? We're working on vocabulary, yes, to improve our vocabulary, but why do we need to improve our vocabulary? Because we're supposed to be learning 2,000 to 3,000 new words a year. And how does that help us? Well, if you increase your vocabulary, you're automatically going to increase your comprehension, because it will be less likely that you're going to come across difficult words and complex texts that you don't know. And if you do come across a complex word that you may not know, then you will be equipped with the tools to look at those word parts and kind of determine what might this word mean. Okay? And so that's what we have to make sure that we're always doing for our kids, so exactly why we're doing what we're doing in the classroom. All right. A very important strategy to use with teaching word parts is looking at words from the text that we read in class. So whether it's a read aloud or just showing kids how to analyze text from maybe the story that we're reading as a classroom from a Basil or something like that, or literature book. So either way, usually there are words in bold print that they want you to teach the kids. And if you're in a situation where you're going to actually pre-teach the vocabulary words, because pre-teaching vocabulary isn't always necessary. If I'm doing a close reading exercise, then I'm not going to want to pre-teach the vocabulary. The vocabulary is something that we want to glean from the close reading exercise that we do. However, if this is just a regular week where we're doing some regular text or a read aloud or something like that, then I may want to pre-teach the vocabulary. And the way you introduce that vocabulary to your students will determine whether or not they're actually going to use that vocabulary, because our SEs say that yes, students are supposed to learn new vocabulary words and be able to use context clues, but more than anything, students are supposed to be able to use those words in their speaking and their writing. And a lot of times we don't give kids enough opportunity in the classroom to really do that. So let's take, for instance, this book, Penduli. So if I were introducing this book to my students, then I'm going to introduce it something like this. Guys, this week we're going to be reading the story Penduli. And it has some fantastic vocabulary words in it that I cannot wait for you to learn, because I can't wait for these words to become part of your 5,000 words. And I always told my kids 5,000, because some research says that if kids are already behind, then they have to exceed that 2,000 to 3,000 mark. And in some cases, it's as high as 5,000 new words per year. So I was always trying to get my kids to be overachievers, so we always said 5,000. So again, guys, I can't wait for you to learn these vocabulary words, because I can't wait to see them in your writing. More importantly, I can't wait until I hear you using these in your everyday speech, because it's just going to make you sound so much more intelligent and educated when you can use these great Tier 2 words, okay? And so this activity we're going to use with a word analysis chart. You'll see a copy of the chart on the next slide. But I'm introducing these words to my kids. So I'll say, boys and girls, the first word I think that you are going to love from this book is garish. Repeat after me, garish. And then the kids have to repeat after me. And I don't care how old they are. I've had seniors in high school the other day repeating after me. You just have to tell them why you have them repeating after you. So with the high school students, I tell them, ladies and gentlemen, the only way you're ever going to use words, you only use words that you are comfortable with. You only use words that you know are correct and that you are really familiar with. And if I don't have you repeat these words in the classroom, I'm afraid that you will not use them in your everyday speaking, because you're not comfortable with them, you're not familiar with them. So I really want you to know how to pronounce them. So when I ask you to repeat after me, I'm not trying to baby you. I just need to know that you know how to say these words, because I don't want there to be any barriers between you using these words, because that's what I want to see. Once I tell the seniors that everybody in the class is repeating after me, so repeat after me, garish, garish, and then they repeat after me, okay? So guys, I can't wait to see that word in some of your writing. Right now in the stories that we're already writing in the classroom, I can see this word being used in some of your papers. I can't wait until you learn it. All right, the next word that I think you're going to love from this story is atrocious. Repeat after me, atrocious. So the kids repeat after me, and we kind of continue in this fashion. Next word is hideous, tormentor, appeased, ravenous, whinnied, and galumped. Now, this is a book that is like on a second grade level, but look at those great Tier 2 words that my students can walk away from this book knowing and being able to use. That's right. They know them and are able to use them when they are part of their 5,000 words. So I would have them write each of those words on the screen here where it says words. So they would actually write each of the first 6 words that I gave them on this word analysis chart. So notice here where we put the source of the words is the book Penduli. The author is Janelle Cannon. And then they write in the first word, garish. Now, the next thing is this. I need you to understand that the word analysis chart is a conversation with you and your students. Okay? It is not another worksheet, but it could easily become another worksheet if you make it that way. I've done vocabulary trainings before, and I've told teachers this: do not make it a worksheet. I shouldn't walk into your classroom after you've given this to the kids one time, and now they're sitting over there trying to work on this alone. That's not how it works. The first 6 times I do this, minimum, this is a conversation with all of us in the classroom working on this together, and as a teacher, I have structured some discussions for my students. They cannot do this on their own right away. Okay? So I next ask them, does the word garish have a prefix or a suffix? And then they would tell me, oh, it has a suffix. And what is that suffix? It's ish. Okay? Now, here's the next thing that I'm going to ask my students. Okay, guys, then what does the suffix ish actually mean? Now, this is where it really helped me as a teacher in doing this word analysis chart, because what does ish really mean? I mean, we think we know what it means. We can give you other words that have that same suffix on the end, but what does the suffix ish mean? Well, ish means almost or approximately. Okay? It means relating to, or being kind of like having the characteristics of. So we're going to talk about that. So ish means you have the characteristics of, is being related to. It means almost or approximately. And then so we're going to say, you know, what are some other words that we've heard that end with ish? So I'm going to say things, or the kids are going to say things like childish. That's right. If you're childish, then you're having or displaying the characteristics of a child. What if you're selfish? Oh, then you're being selfish, or you're only thinking about yourself. Okay. What if I say the word elfish? Elfish. Oh, that means you have the characteristics of an elf. Okay, maybe you got some pointed ears and stuff like that. All right, maybe you're really tiny. So we try to come up with as many words as possible that have that suffix as well. And then we think about, now, all those words that we listed, what part of speech are they? All of those words, if you think about them, they are all adjectives. All of them: selfish, childish, elfish, adjectives. So any word that ends with the ish, it's going to be an adjective. Do you see how powerful that is to help a student, that when they are coming to a word on their vocabulary or on an assessment, and they see this, you know, this word that they don't really know how to pronounce, but it does have an ish on the end, so at least I know it's an adjective describing something that's coming up in the sentence. All right, that's power in knowing that it's an adjective, and at least I would pick an answer choice that's an adjective and not something that's not, right? So that's a great tool to use with your kids, teaching them how to look at these word parts and analyze these words. So it's an adjective. Now, how many syllables does garish have? Okay, this is where I can have them look in the dictionary, look it up, look at that syllabication, because that's in their essays as well. And I see here that garish has 2 syllables. I could have my kids clap it, garish. Or we could just do the chin drop thing by placing their hand underneath their chin and then just speaking the word garish and counting how many times their jaws actually dropped. Now, this is something that I did with my kids even up to 7th and 8th grade, because you'd be surprised at the number of kids who were struggling at reading, and they really couldn't hardly tell me how many syllables a word had. And we need to understand that a word has as many syllables as it has vowel sounds. And in this particular word, it has the vowel sound that the AR makes, R, eh, and then the ish, okay? So it has 2 syllables. Now, knowing the syllabication also helps kids actually pronounce the word. When we get into those larger, longer, multiple syllabic words, it helps the kid know that a word has 3 syllables versus 5 syllables, so that they're not pronouncing the word incorrectly. So that's why we study syllabication as well. So then I'm going to tell my students a simple definition for garish, because I don't want them looking at the dictionary definition. Because that's what happens when they look at the dictionary definition, is then they have to look up all the words in the dictionary definition because they don't understand the dictionary definition. And that's not what we want. We don't want to waste time with that. So I'm going to tell them that garish means very colorful or overly decorative, very ornate. Okay? So I might even show them some pictures of some very ornate things, some things that are very decorative. So we're going to talk about the word decorative. What word does it come from? Decorate, okay? Or decor. And it just means, you know, lots of stuff, Okay, very colorful as well. So I'm going to tell them it means lots and lots and lots of colors. And I might give them some examples of some things that may be garish. Okay, so I'm going to say, would some Easter eggs be garish? And the kids would, tell me an explanation. Yes, some Easter eggs might be garish. I've seen some that have, lots of different colors on them, and then they got stickers all on them and everything else. And then I might say, would a wedding dress be considered garish? And they might say, well, it could be, depending on, I've seen a TV show on TV called My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the ladies have these dresses that are tie-dyed and just all kind of colors, and they're huge, and they can't even fit into the limo. So it could be, but most traditional wedding dresses wouldn't be garish. They are simple and white, most of them, the traditional ones. And while they might have some decorations, it wouldn't be overly done, overly colorful and things like that. So we would talk about garish. And then I would say, now give me an antonym. I could either choose a synonym or an anonym. Here for this one, I'm going to say, no, then give me an anonym. If garish means very colorful and decorated and ornate, then what would be an anonym? And then the kids might throw out some things like plain, dull, ordinary. Okay? So they would give me the anonym. Now, that's one we do together, me with my think aloud. The next one that we would do is the next word in our list. But I would also then have my kids discuss this word garish a little bit further. So I would maybe ask them the question, do you think most brides would want a garish wedding dress? Why or why not? So at their tables, in their groups, they would discuss this, and each person would be responsible for giving me their opinion on this word. Or I could say, talk about a time when you saw something that was garish. What was going on? What was it that you saw? And each child would have to share. And they have to use the word garish in their explanation. Now, something as simple as that is very difficult for kids to do. It's very difficult for adults to do. I've done this training lots of times with large groups of adults, and I have to keep reminding them, okay, well then you use the word in your sentence, and they'll say things like, Lady Gaga wore a very ornate costume, and I'd say, well, where's the vocabulary word? And they'd have to go back and rephrase the sentence saying that Lady Gaga wore a very garish outfit, and then I'm going to say, how do you know it was garish? That had red stripes, blue polka dots, and green checkers. Okay, now that shows me they know what the word garish actually means. Very colorful. You just can't say, that kind of cuts back on the kids saying things like, yesterday I saw a garish. Well, first of all, if you saw a garish, that means it's a noun. And we've already said garish is an adjective. So can you see how having kids talk about the vocabulary in this way really helps to build their vocabulary? They have to use the words. Again, do not make the word analysis chart into a worksheet. It is not. It is meant to be a discussion with your students. And usually I took the whole first day of my little reading lesson was just the pre-teaching of the vocabulary using the word analysis chart. Now, you may not do that. Maybe, and the way I justified it, it was that normally we have like 10 minutes for vocabulary instruction each day. I just took my 10 minutes on the front end and did a whole 35 minutes. And again, I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. No, I would not work on any one thing for 40 minutes with a kindergartner or a 1st grader. Okay? And what's great about this chart is that as you're going through all of these words, the kids really pick up very quickly on the different meanings of those prefixes and suffixes and things like that. Another great thing about this chart, and the one that I put in your handouts, I believe I went ahead and put the Word document in there, is that this is one that I use 4th grade about middle of the year, on up. So when I first started out, I didn't have prefix and suffix on here. Maybe I only had prefixes if that's all I taught. Or maybe I had a column for prefix and a column for suffix. And then a part of speech and a number of syllables. Or maybe I didn't have synonym or anonym. Maybe if I'd only taught synonyms and I only had synonyms over there. Or if I wanted them to work on antonyms, then maybe that's what I had them doing. Okay, so you can change these column headings to fit whatever your kids are working on. Again, this is one for upper elementary about middle of the year when we taught all of these different things, or it just depends on how quickly you get to all of these different things. With the lower elementary, I had a column that was short vowel sound or long vowel sound. So you can change it there and also work on your vowels. So this chart can do so many things. That's why I liked it. It's one of those things that gives you a lot of bang for your buck. You can work on so many different skills with this one chart by having this discussion with your kids and working on it, and they work on them as a class together, and then you add in those opportunities for them to talk and discuss together. Now on the back of this chart, there are some lines for them to write sentences. Okay, it's never just enough to tell kids to write a sentence for a word. They have to be able to write a sentence that shows they understand that word in context. So for this one, what I like to do is to make kids have to write a sentence that has at least as many words as they are years old. So the other day I was in a high school class and the kids had to write, they was in a sophomore level class, and so the kids had to write sentences with at least 15 words, and it couldn't be run-ons that showed they understood the words in context. And the kids had a great time. You should have seen these sophomores trying to write sentences that had at least 15 words in them. And they were so proud of themselves when some of them can come up with sentences that had 20 and 22 words, all punctuated properly. What this does with the lower level kids, the middle school, the elementary and the middle school kids, is it teaches them how to start using things like adverb phrases or adjective phrases or introductory clauses in their sentences to get them to be a little longer. Okay, it really works on those types of skills with those kids. So again, look at all the different skills this one chart is getting in as far as work. It's working on prefixes and suffixes. It's working on building my vocabulary. It's working on parts of speech, numbers of syllables. It's working on the definition of these words. It's working on them being able to write sentences with properly written context clues. It's working on synonyms and antonyms, and it really can work on anything depending on your the headings of your columns. So the question that I normally get is, well, how can I use this with kindergartners? And here's what I say to folks there. If you want to use this with lower kids, you just wouldn't have so many columns. You just wouldn't have so many columns, and maybe on the synonym or antonyms and things like that, I could put like little pictures, smiley faces, or a sad face. Does it have one? Does it not? So little things like that. They could put an X in the box. So there are ways that you can make this appropriate for a lower grade level. But from third grade on up, they could definitely use the type of chart that's already on the screen. Absolutely, they could. Just depending on the skills that you're working on. Like I said, I had on some of these charts short vowel sounds or long vowel sounds. And even for some of my older kids, I remember working with some 6th graders, and they had a hard time telling me if they heard a long vowel sound in the word. So when I was working as a reading specialist with my dyslexia students, you know, they would have trouble hearing those vowel sounds. And so that was one of the columns on the chart. Do you hear a long vowel sound? What is that long vowel sound? I taught them how to use the diacritical marks for those vowels. Or, you know, and once they learn long and short, then I can just put on there one column, long or short vowel sounds, which ones they hear. You could do blends if you had words. So there's so many things that you could use this chart for. But again, just don't turn it into a worksheet. We did all this together, the front part of the page together as a class, and then I would sometimes assign the sentences as homework, or they were due by Friday or by the last day of us reading the particular story that we were working on. Okay. But again, this is like a 2nd grade book, Penduli, and you see, let's go back and look at those vocabulary words that are in this particular book. Look at those wonderful vocabulary words. And every day that we're working on these words, I'm telling them, gosh, I can't wait to hear these words in your stories. And these are the words that are going up on my word walls, these tier 2 words. So I'm putting these up as well. So you might have your sight words in one color card on the word wall, and then these tier 2 words, these wonderful words that I want kids to use in their writing, then maybe I put those up on the word wall in a different color. But your word wall should be filled with words by now with all the reading you should have been doing in the classroom. Okay, so the last strategy that I wanted to talk to you about was strategy number 5, which is multiple exposure to words in active game-like situations. So we talked about using word parts and word analysis, just really teaching kids to look at those words, to come up with words and relate them to other words that have those the same or similar prefixes and suffixes or roots and bases. So the fifth strategy is just to have multiple exposures to the words in active game-like situations. A lot of times what happens with vocabulary is that we give kids a list of vocabulary words on Monday, then on Friday we take a test, and then on Saturday they've forgotten them all. And that is not what our objectives say. Our SEs specifically say that our students have to be able to use those words. And if they're going to be able to use those words, then they need multiple exposures. Okay? So it's better to teach a few words very well rather than give students these long lists of words with superficial meanings that they don't hold on to, that they never really learn, they never really add to their 5,000. So we want to go wide and deep encounters with new words so that they build that rich understanding of the word. So with your word analysis chart, it's not enough to do the chart. That discussion aspect is just as important. They have to repeat the word. They have to then use that word in context, in a discussion. That's just as important as actually filling in that chart. Without it, without that quality exposure to the word, they're going to forget them. So how much rehearsal is needed in order to master new vocabulary? Remember, when I told you 2,000 to 3,000 new words per year, I'm saying they know those words. And the truth is, look, they're not going to learn 2,000 to 3,000 new words. What they're going to learn is about 500 new roots or bases or things like that. And from those new roots or bases, they can get 20 words. So that's how they get to 2,000 to 3,000 words per year. Because every time I learn a new inflectional variation of that word, so let's take the word pay, and then I learn the prefix ment. So now I know what a payment is. Okay, when I can add the S onto it for payments, then now I know how to make it plural. Okay, if I change that word to paid, now I know it's past tense, paid. If I know the prefix re, and now I know the word repay. So that's how they're going to get their 5,000 words in. And when I tell kids that, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I think we can do it then. And that's what we want. We want to make kids word conscious, make them aware of the words. And so a gifted learner is going to need 1 to 5 repetitions of a word in order to have mastery. And a bright student, they're going to need 6 to 10. So what does that tell you about your kids that are struggling? They're going to need lots and lots of exposure to the word in order to make it one of their 5,000 words. And there are 3 things that you need to remember about the rehearsal. Memory of information improves with the number of repetitions. So the more they hear the word, the better, the more it's going to be in their memory. A lot of times, we like to say that kids, oh, they don't recall anything or they can't remember anything. But keep in mind those numbers. A bright child needs, what, 6 to 10? So then your kid that's struggling, if you haven't said a word or haven't given them quality exposure to that word, we're talking more than 10 times at least, at a minimum, then they may not retain the words. Rehearsal needs to be spaced over time. I can't do all the rehearsal in one day and thinking that's going to be good as we do it one day, then maybe a couple of days later we go back to it and review some more, and then maybe a couple of days later we do some more, maybe a couple of weeks we keep bringing them up. But if kids are using it in their writing and then they're speaking, then that's how they're going to actually add those words to their 5,000 words for the year. I can't just do it all once in a day. So while I might do the word charts in one day, the word analysis charts, that doesn't end there. Those words don't stop there with the word analysis chart. We're going to see them in the book that we're reading, so that's another exposure to them. We've used them in the discussion for the word chart. That's another exposure to them. But we're also going to do some other things with those words, and I'm going to show you a little later here in this presentation. A third thing to remember about rehearsal is that active rehearsal is more effective than passive rehearsal. So doing something with those words, so with my little ones manipulating word tiles or letter tiles, that's going to be more efficient or more effective than them listening to you or seeing you write the words on the board. They need to be doing the writing. They need to be doing the manipulation of the letter tiles and things like that. So the secret of vocabulary development is this: just like anything else, either you use them or you lose them. And again, look on the screen there where it says, our SCs say that the students understand new vocabulary and use it when reading and writing. If they're not using it in their writing, and like I say, every time we introduce new words or pre-taught new words from a book that we were reading, that is how I prefaced it with my kids. Guys, I can't wait for you to learn these words because I can't wait for them to be used in your writing. I can't wait to see these when you write your stories. And then I may even give them some examples. Oh, I can't wait for you to use this in your Halloween story. Some of you were talking about how garish your costumes were, so I can't wait for you to use that word. You got to keep bringing it up to the kids. Got to keep bringing those words up, multiple exposures to the word. So another way that I did the multiple exposure is, let's say it's been a week or so after we've read the book Penduli. Well, this next week we're on a different story. We're introducing new vocabulary words, but in my vocabulary or word works center on the computers, and I have this little vocabulary challenge that I'm going to have the kids complete in a group. So on this one, they would work in a group, and you put a little protocol over there of what they're supposed to do. The group fills out one form together. You assign them roles, a group leader, so that they know what the group leader has to do, and the group leader is responsible for getting input from everybody on the team. So in teams, they're going to choose a word that answers each of the questions. They're going to write the answers on their little whiteboards, and then they're going to check their answers and things like that. And then maybe I have a scorekeeper that keeps track of the team's points. So I let them know this is the review from Penduli. But they also know, just from experience, that other words from our previous week can also be mixed in here as well. So the first thing we do is I kind of give them a little review. They look at garish, too bright or showy. And again, I have a picture here for them. Then we look at atrocious, some example sentences, and then some examples of things that might be atrocious. Hideous. Whinnied. And on this one, as often as possible, I always worked in urban areas where my kids really didn't necessarily get a lot of time to go out into the country and see different things. So on this one, when we learned the word whinnied, you know, because a lot of kids thought that was a funny word, and it's like they had never heard it before. And then when I played this for them, so they got to hear a real horse's whinny. And they were like, that's what you call that noise that a horse makes? Yes, that's a whinny. That's what horses do. So that was always, you know, really entertaining. And so as much as possible, when I could put some type of video visual in there for them, just made it so much better. A tormentor, galumpt, appeased. So they just kind of go through and review. I could have one of the jobs in this little station could be the person who reviews, and so this person kind of reads through this for the group. And then they go into the little competition or quiz part of it. So which word is spelled incorrectly, and they would have to write it down. They discuss as a group, they write all the answers down, and then they check their answers. Okay. Another one, some would say that this word describes how Lady Gaga and Nicki Minaj usually dress. So when you look at that, hopefully they can see that those outfits are pretty garish. And notice how I'm using contemporary examples. I'm going to use things that I think my kids like or know, so that they can see how these words relate to real world things. Again, which word means a person who causes you pain? That's going to be your tormentor. Which word is spelled incorrectly? Again, another one. And then we have hideous.
Something's wrong with you, really.
And then you can use analogies in here as well. Oink is to pig as blank is to horse. So that would be whinnied. Which word has a suffix? And then they would go and tell me that.
Yeah, baby.
Again, whenever possible, I would use sounds and stuff so they would, you know, keep them entertained. Some might say that this dog is what? Oh, and they knew he was a little hideous.
Oh, that is nasty.
Okay, so that's how we would kind of keep those words from our previous stories going through. So then the next week I would have the previous week's stories words in a little vocabulary challenge quiz like that. And what's so great about it is that eventually we got to the point where my little GT kids, they could create some of these things for you. As you know, extra credit, they were always looking for something to do. So they enjoyed looking for things to put together as a presentation, and they were so happy that they could put on there, created by so-and-so, and they really like that. So another activity or game-like activity that works very well, especially this one's more for the little ones, is the vocabulary rap. So the teacher begins by telling the students that they're going to be chanting synonyms or antonyms. So I'm going to say, today class, we're going to be doing synonyms. So then I'm going to chant like, so when I say hideous, you say ugly, hideous, ugly, hideous, ugly. And so the kids just kind of chant the synonyms, and they love it, and they think it is so hilarious to do that. And you just keep doing that. Eventually you can get to where your kids can actually lead the chants themselves, and that's what you really want. You want the kids to be able to use a chant. You can put it to a little beat, to a little music, and they love it. The little ones go wild, do a little clap with it and everything like that. But that's what you want. You want to get the kids moving and excited to learn new words. We want them word conscious. We want to make them word nerds. And this is one of the ways that you can do that. A lot of my kids were very musically inclined. They love music. So that was one of the things that I could do to really help keep them involved in the learning vocabulary. Some other game-like options would be things like having kids write down 3 truths and a lie about a vocabulary word. So they would pull a vocabulary word from maybe an envelope, and then they had to write 3 things that were true about that word and 1 thing that was a lie. And we would have to exchange cards. I could have them kind of do a little mingle, turn on some music. They walk around with their cards, and when the music stops, they stop, pair up with someone, and then they have to read their 3 truths and a lie, and their partner has to try to figure out what the lie is. Okay, so that way I'm assessing them on 2 different levels. Were they able to write 3 true things about their vocabulary words? And then was the student able to pick out the thing that was not true, their partner pair? Another thing I could do is a mark my words bookmark. So this is one of those things where during independent reading, a lot of times I see kids reading independently. I want kids to know that they're supposed to be getting or learning new vocabulary words from their books that they're reading. And so you can give them this bookmark, and they would write their name, the name of the book, and the date. And what I used to do is have mine have to turn in at least 1 bookmark per week from their independent reading, because you can send a reading log home, but you never really know if they're learning the words or if they're really reading, because the parent can actually just sign the log. So this is one way I kind of hold them accountable as well for their independent reading, and knowing that when they read, they're supposed to be learning new words. Okay, and if they're reading and not learning new words, then that must mean that book is not at the level that they need. They need a more challenging book, because they need to be learning some new words. And so they just write the page number and the word. They would have to know the definition of that word. And the way I would grade these sometimes, because I know getting grades in is an issue, is they would turn in their bookmark, and I would just ask each one word from that list as they're leaving. If they knew it, then check. If not, then I knew I'd have to grab them again on the next day because they needed to go study. Another thing you can do is what I call the thinking game. And this is an activity that we played a lot in the classroom, or a mystery word from our word wall. So I would say, all right, guys, I want you to write down, I'm thinking of a word on my word wall, and it has 3 syllables. And so they would just write down one of the words from the word wall. And then I slowly start giving them clues. Okay? But I want to explain to you the thinking game. This is one we played whenever we had an additional time when we were lining up to go somewhere. It only took a couple of 2 or 3 minutes or so. And what this does is allow students to practice using new vocabulary words or words they've acquired. And it forces them to think quickly and can be used when you have a few minutes of class time to spare. So instead of just doing nothing, then all right, everybody stand up, let's play the thinking game. So the kids stand up by their chair, and as a teacher I'm going to give them a prefix or a suffix, and then each student, I'm going to kind of whip around the room really fast, just pointing to kids, and everybody has to give me a word with that particular prefix or suffix, or I could do it with words with blends, or I could do word families, or rhyming words. Rhyming words would be pretty difficult to do. But I can say words that start with CH, and then everybody has to give me a word that starts with CH. So as I point to you, you have to give me your word. If you say the word then you're out, and all you do is just sit down in your chair. Okay? And so Sometimes you might have a child who even, just tries to get out really quickly because they don't know any words, or they feel they don't know any words. But here's the good part. Even if they sit down and get out, listening to the other kids in the classroom come up with words always helps kids. So at first this game is going to be very short, but eventually it gets pretty long because the kids get really good at building their vocabulary and being able to choose new words. So if, I can give them all kinds of clues. Things that are usually almost always the color white. So they might say things like diaper, your eyeballs, snow, sugar, salt. So the kids really get, but what I'm doing is having them to quickly call on their background knowledge about what words they already know. Then the kids also get really good at using other words that mean the same thing. Okay? So things that are associated with a baby. So one kid might say a rattle, another kid might say a shaker, or something like that. And I would take that because they were attempting to use a different word for the same word. But what I really want them to do is just to call on their background knowledge very quickly, these playing of the words. Okay. Another activity might be vocabulary paint chips. This one is for the older students, and it really works with the connotation and denotation, or just different degrees of a word. Okay. Websites you can use. This one is a really cute one. It's called freerice.com. Every time a kid gets a word correct, they get a little pile of rice. So they get 10 grains of rice. And the more you get correct, the more grains of rice you get. And what's great about this website is that they donate however much rice you get. They donate that to villages, to starving villages. So kids can learn vocabulary and help out other people. How great is that? Where they are actually learning vocabulary but helping other people. Here's one for the older students. It's a website called MemBean. It is a paid website service, but it really helps kids with those SAT words and things like that. Don't forget about the things that may come with your textbook adoption. A lot of times your textbook adoptions have vocabulary games and things that might be online. It might have some little auxiliary books, workbooks and things like that. Don't forget about the old games like word charades and things like that, or the game Heads Up that you can use as an app on your phone. It's from the Ellen DeGeneres show. And you, as a teacher, you can buy, like for 99 cents, you can purchase the right to put your own words in there. And so that's what I did. When I was teaching summer school, I would put the words that we had learned from our stories in the phone, and then the kids would actually play with those words. And they had a really good time learning or showing how much of the words that they had really learned. Again, these are the resources that were used in the making of this particular webinar. They're really great resources, and 3 out of the 4 are absolutely free. Here is the link to get copies of today's materials. I'll leave that up there a little bit. You can also scan it. But go ahead and snap a picture if you don't have time to type it in. That's the way you can get all the materials that are from this particular webinar. All right, just a little bit longer. And now, do we have any questions or anything like that? We got just a couple of more minutes, so if you have any questions, let me know. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, good. And I'm going to assume you're really happy. And as always, my challenge is to people. My challenge is that I challenge you to just try one of the things that you learned from today's session or that you saw. You do get copies of handouts and things like that. Just try one. Do not turn the word analysis chart into a worksheet. Please don't do that. And if nothing else, then I do thank you for attending our session today. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can contact me using the information on the screen. If for any reason you didn't get a chance to get those handouts, let me know. and I will send them to you electronically there. But thank you so much for joining us. Go forth and create word nerds, and have a great evening.